Hello and welcome to a world shaped by quiet discipline and long horizons. Imagine an island realm where mountains rise like folded screens, where the sea forms a perfect ring of solitude, and where an entire civilization lived beneath a canopy of soft lantern light for centuries without raising armies or launching campaigns. A land with warriors but no wars. A land with ambition yet little conquest. A land so rigidly ordered it should have fractured under its own weight. By all logical measure, such a society shut away from foreign influence, pressed into an intricate hierarchy, and governed by men who carried swords they rarely used, should not have lasted. And yet for more than 250 years, Edo Japan endured with a calm that seemed carved into the very air. This is the story of that calm of samurai transformed into stewards of peace, of merchants gaining strength in a world that denied them honor, of artisans shaping beauty, from silence of farmers sustaining the entire realm, grain by grain, and of tea rooms where a single breath could hold meaning. How did a warrior elite reinvent itself without losing face? How did commoners rise in influence while remaining officially at the bottom of society? How did a closed nation become one of the most literate and refined cultures on earth? We will explore the machinery of Tokugawa, rule the contradictions within its social classes, the vibrant pulse of its cities, the strict rhythms of daily life, and the subtle philosophies that shaped its spirit. But before we step into Edo's avenues, let your thoughts settle. Let the world grow quiet. Let the centuries thin like mist at the edge of dawn. Now breathe and step with me across the wooden bridge of time. Hear the echo of wooden sandals, smell the faint smoke of pine charcoal, see the glow of paper lanterns trembling in the early wind. This is the doorway into Edo, a realm cradled by long peace, watched by mountains and preserved like ink drying on an ancient scroll. The capital, drawn from stillness, Edo emerged from marshland with the deliberate calm of a calligrapher setting brush to paper. In the early 17th century, the future capital was little more than wetlands and scattered villages, but under Tokugawa Ieyasu it became a city engineered for order. The stakes after centuries of civil war were immense. Lords had to be restrained, ambition contained, and loyalty woven into a stable lattice. The daimyo were required to keep residences in Edo, maintaining their wives and heirs in the capital while traveling home only in designated years. Magnificent processions marched along the highways displaying pride even as they surrendered freedom. We see one such procession lacquered armor gleaming under morning sun banners, fluttering servants carrying chests of kimono documents, incense bedding. Villagers kneel as the spectacle passes, a performance designed not to celebrate power but to regulate it. This was political engineering disguised as ceremony. Edo's straight roads, moats, and districts served as both infrastructure and silent supervision. Warriors lived in assigned quarters, merchants crowded near the bridges, artisans clustered along canals. Through this landscape walked men who once lived by the bow and spear. Their swords remained at their sides, but their battles had long shifted to the realm of administration, accounting, and etiquette. The city moved in steady rhythm, its order felt more in the quiet moments than the grand ones. The quieted blade. The samurai class embodied a paradox: men trained for war in a world that refused to give them one. Their armor, once scarred by decades of conflict, now hung unchanged in storerooms. Their swords, passed from father to son, became symbols of reputation rather than tools of survival. In this atmosphere lived Matsunaga, a mid-ranking retainer whose days unfolded with quiet predictability. Each morning he crossed the same wooden threshold to record rice stipends in his lord's storehouse. His writing brush moved with the precision once reserved for archery. At home, his wife tended a stone garden with 2 pines and a patch of moss. His son practiced brushwork in the yard, dipping ink too eagerly, staining his sleeves with the impatience of youth. Samurai identity forged in fire now turned inward. Discipline became scholarship, loyalty became bureaucracy, and valor became restraint. This was the cultural innovation of the era, a warrior class recasting itself as guardians of stability, scholars of ethics and pillars of administration. Yet beneath the surface, unexpressed longings lingered, not loud enough to disrupt the order, but present in every polished blade and formal bow. The markets beneath the lanterns. While the samurai preserved the calm, the merchants filled it with motion. In the districts around Nihonbashi, life quickened with the rising sun. Lanterns swayed over stalls selling indigo cloth, medicinal herbs, fish on beds of crushed ice, printed books, brushes, rice crackers shimmering with syrup. Merchants officially placed below peasants in the social hierarchy came to shape the urban economy more than any other class. We meet Sagawa Kichijiro, a dealer in fine cotton. His shutters open precisely as a distant bell sounds. He bows to the street sweep's dust from the doorway and arranges bolts of cloth in gentle cascading patterns that feel almost ceremonial. He cannot carry swords, he holds no official rank, yet he influences the city through credit supply and subtle negotiation. The real innovation arose in Edo's commercial methods: loan networks, warehouse systems, standardized measures, and the earliest forms of sophisticated bookkeeping in Japanese history. With rising prosperity came a flourishing of culture, ukiyo-e prints, kabuki theaters, lending libraries, puppet plays, and storytellers under willows by the river. Commerce turned into culture, and culture turned into identity. But the hum of the markets blended seamlessly into the serenity of the realm, as though Edo itself wished to keep its wonders from becoming too loud. The House of Steam and Silence. Among all the arts that matured during this long peace, none expressed the spirit of the era more deeply than the tea ceremony. A tea room was no larger than a few paces in each direction, built of bamboo, earth, and wood, yet it held the depth of an entire philosophy. Here worked Shunryo, a tea master, whose movements seemed to dissolve into the soft light. He warmed the water with slow attention. He whisked powdered tea until it folded into a smooth, jade-colored foam. He placed each bowl before his guests with a dignity that asked for no words. In the tea-room rank melted away. Samurai merchants, monks all knelt at the same height. All shared the same fragile bowl. All listened to the water simmering just beyond hearing. Tea was an education in presence, to see the grain of the wood, to notice the faint scent of straw mats, to feel the warmth of the bowl against the palms. The ceremony offered a discipline that complemented the structure of Edo society: simplicity in a complex world, clarity within rigid order, calm despite unspoken tensions. When guests left the tea room, they stepped back into the streets with a quieter mind, carrying the memory of steam and silence as though it were a piece of wisdom tucked inside their sleeves. The stillness before us night folds over the capital, softening every rooftop and riverbank. Paper lanterns glow like amber moons along the bridges. Families withdraw behind their thin walls. The air cools, carrying the scent of cedar and warm rice. Edo rests, not because the world is perfect, but because its people have learned how to hold their lives gently, with consistency, patience, and ritual. This stillness is the shape of the era, a vast realm humming with restrained power, a society suspended between tradition and subtle transformation, a culture finding meaning in the quiet corners of daily life. And from this calm foundation, the story of centuries continues forward, the machinery of peace. Edo stirs before sunrise, its rooftops fading gradually from grey to the soft pearl of morning. We resume from the quiet breath where part one ended, not with disruption, but with the gentle continuation of a society built to keep its own pulse steady. The first truth of this chapter is this: peace in the Tokugawa world was not passive, it was engineered. After centuries of civil strife, the shogunate understood that unity required more than force. It required structure, predictability, a rhythm that every person from the highest daimyo to the humblest woodcutter could feel beneath their feet. This structure is most visible in the system known as Sankin Kotai, the alternate attendance policy binding daimyo to Edo, and by extension binding their ambitions to the shogun's will. We return to Hoshino Tadakatsu, the northern lord whose procession we once glimpsed. His men march in perfect ranks as they approach a checkpoint on the main highway. Here officials examine travel papers with meticulous care, counting attendance, inspecting crests, confirming each detail against the registry kept in Edo. Tadakatsu obeys these rituals with composed dignity, but the weight of them is undeniable. Every journey drains his treasury. Every visit to Edo reminds him that the power he commands in his home province shrinks beneath the gaze of the shogunate. Control is maintained not through open threat, but through a web of obligations so consistent that resistance becomes impractical. Edo peace rests on this quiet apparatus, a network of rules that shape behavior long before conflict can arise. The capital of 10,000 rhythms. As daylight strengthens, Edo unfurls. A city this large does not awaken quickly. It thickens one sound at a time. Fishermen drag boats ashore along the Sumida River. Vendors roll open shutters at Nihonbashi. Children run errands between wells and alleyways. Scribes prepare brushes. Artisans strike chisels against wood, filling entire districts with the soft percussion of labor. The framing idea of this section is clear. Edo was not merely large, it was coordinated. More than 1 million people lived here, yet its neighborhoods behaved like interlocking gears. Fire brigades drilled in narrow lanes. Town patrols swept through the night, carrying wooden clappers. Water channels and stone-lined canals managed the flow of life with quiet efficiency. We focus on Sagawa Kichijiro, the cotton merchant whose shop glows with indigo dyes. His prosperity depends entirely on timing the arrival of shipments, the pace of the dyers, the cycles of demand from samurai households. He tracks all of it with a small notebook he keeps tucked in his sleeve. Every day begins the same way: a bow to the street, a sweep of the threshold, a careful arrangement of fabrics that must appear both abundant and deliberate. Edo is a place where routine becomes art. Even the air seems organized, smoke drifting upward in clean vertical strands, the smells of grilled fish and miso weaving through the market like familiar companions. The city thrives because its people know their roles and play them with subtle pride. The schools of order. While the city moves in measured steps, its intellect also deepens. Education becomes a quiet force running through the realm, shaping not only the minds of the young, but the soul of the period itself. Our guiding statement here, Edo Japan, cultivated knowledge the way it cultivated rice, patiently, consistently, and across every class. Temple schools teach reading and arithmetic. Domain academies instruct samurai in law, history, and ethics. Merchants hire tutors for their children, ensuring that even those denied status can wield the power of literacy. We return briefly to Ito Naomasa, the cooper's son. His brush strokes are more confident now, his characters cleaner. His teacher encourages him with soft corrections, reminding him that a well-formed line is not simply a sign of skill, but a reflection of discipline. In Edo Castle, scholars debate Confucian principles. Along riverbank, street vendors sell cheap printed novels. In back rooms of merchant houses, apprentices practice abacus calculations that would impress European mathematicians of the same century. This intellectual flourishing requires no fanfare. It seeps silently into the population, sharpening judgment, strengthening memory, and feeding the arts. Knowledge becomes a stabilizing force, a mirror that shows the realm what it is, and sometimes hints at what it could become. Letters behind paper walls. Daily life continues behind the thin walls of Edo homes' walls that breathe with the seasons' walls that both protect and reveal. This section's truth is gentle private life is the quiet center around which the entire society turns. In the Matsunaga household we find familiar rhythms, Hana tending her flower arrangement in the alcove, her son practicing lines from a moral tale on fresh paper, Matsunaga himself reviewing the day's records under the faint glow of an oil lamp. Privacy in Edo is delicate. Conversations glide easily between households. A child's laughter, a woman's song, a neighbor's sigh all pass through screens made of paper and wood. This proximity fosters a culture of attentiveness, soft voices, polite disagreements, swift apologies, shared responsibility when fires break out or when sickness visits a home. A community cannot be peaceful without these habits. The architecture of Edo enforces them, the people refine them. Through this daily life gains a texture both fragile and intimate, a softness that carries the city deeper into its long era of calm, where lanterns gather at dusk. As the sun descends, Edo undergoes a subtle transformation. Markets quiet. Workers rest. The river darkens to mirror the evening sky, and lanterns begin to glow along the streets like a constellation scattered across the earth. This nighttime city reveals another dimension of Edo life, an undercurrent of pleasure, curiosity, and artistic expression. We step into the theatre district where actors rehearse behind sliding doors and musicians tune their shamisen beneath eaves dampened by night air. Poets gather in tea houses exchanging verses over bowls of warm sake. Printmakers carve images of courtesans and kabuki stars capturing the fleeting beauty of the floating world. Here, routines loosen. Voices grow livelier. Laughter lingers longer. Yet everything remains woven into the fabric of Edo's larger order. The floating world does not disrupt the society, it complements it, offering release from the pressures of rank duty and repetition. A samurai may watch a play in secret. A merchant may commission a print of his favorite actor. A fisherman may fall asleep to music drifting from across the bridge. Even as the lanterns burn low, the city retains its poise. Night in Edo is not a break from peace, it is the peace illuminated. The realm under a quiet sky. When darkness fully settles, the city slows into its final shape of the day. The clappers of the night patrol echo softly in the distance. The river carries reflections downstream. Household lamps fade one by one. Edo does not sleep easily, it sleeps watchfully, following rhythms practiced for generations. Here, under the still sky, the shogun's order continues its slow, deliberate turning. No banners rise, no rebellions whisper, no armies prepare. The machinery of peace holds firm, carried quietly by those who live inside its design. And with this, the night deepens, not as a prelude to turmoil, but as part of the steady breath of a realm shaped by discipline and long patience. Fields drawn in water and light. Morning drifts across the countryside outside Edo in a thin, silvery veil. Mist clings to the paddies, turning each plot into a mirror where sky and earth briefly trade places. The city's distant hum disappears here. The world narrows to the slow, deliberate motions of farmers moving knee-deep through water. The framing truth for this chapter is simple. The stability of an entire nation rested on the fragile stalks of rice. Across the archipelago, villages rise with the sun. Men wade along embankments, placing seedlings with practiced precision. Women bend over water-filled trays, sorting shoots by texture and length. Children chase dragonflies along the ridges, learning early the rhythms that will one day shape their lives. Among them works Kawai Toranosuke, a tenant farmer with weathered hands and a gaze sharpened by years spent reading the land. He wakes before the first bird call, tests the soil between his fingers, and knows instantly whether the water must be raised or lowered. His world is measured in inches of rainfall and days of sunlight. The fortunes of distant lords mean little compared to the health of these green blades. Rice cultivation in the Edo period was not guesswork. Villages maintained irrigation canals carved with near-geometric accuracy. Water gates adjusted flow according to tide, moon, and season. Tools evolved slowly but steadily, heavier spades for clay soils, lighter ones for sand. Each innovation served one purpose: to feed the realm consistently enough that peace could hold. And so the paddies shimmer through the morning, a vast mosaic of labor that never announces itself but sustains everything. Granaries of obligation. When rice leaves the fields, it enters a different world. The world of stipends, taxes, and politics. In Edo, Japan, rice was the language of power. The stipends of samurai, the rank of lords, the obligations between domains, all were measured in koku, the amount needed to feed one person for a year. We return to Matsunaga, whose duties in his lord's storehouse anchor his position more firmly than his sword ever could. He arrives before the doors open, records weight sacks on paper sheets refined to a softness resembling silk, and checks figures twice before applying his seal. Outside, porters unload bundles from countryside domains, rice tied in straw, carried like newborn calves. Inside, the granary's wooden beams creak softly under the weight, exuding the faint scent of old grain and cedar. Every measure matters. A slight discrepancy affects household budgets. A poor harvest in one province forces adjustments across the network. A surplus shifts market prices in the capital. Merchants, meanwhile, convert rice into coin through complex credit systems. They store it, lend it, speculate with it, maneuver around it all while remaining officially beneath peasants in rank. Rice does not simply feed bodies, it orders society. Within these granaries lies the mathematics of survival, and within those calculations, the future of every household in Edo, the roads of duty and dust. Beyond the paddies and granaries stretch the arteries that keep the archipelago connected, the great highways of the Tokugawa era. Our guiding statement here, movement itself, became an instrument of governance. The Tokaido and Nakasendo broad pine-lined routes carry everything from pilgrims to cargo, from official messengers to wandering monks. We follow Ryun, the traveling monk whose sandals know the feel of every milestone. His staff taps steadily as he moves between villages, offering prayers for harvests, guidance to families, and stories gathered from distant towns. Along the roads, post stations bustle with activity. Porters wait for hire. Pack horses drink from troughs. Travelers exchange news in tea houses where steam curls toward rafters, blackened by years of charcoal. The highways knit the nation together. Checkpoints ensure documents are in order. Inns provide beds for merchants and officials alike. Messenger runners carry sealed letters with astonishing speed. The roads are more than pathways, they are lines of communication, trust, and observation. They allow Edo's order to extend far beyond Edo's walls. And yet, as travelers exchange tales over bowls of tea, ideas move with them, philosophies, rumors, concerns about harvests, whispers of new learning. The shogunate controls movement, but not thought. The roads, steady as they appear, carry more than footsteps. Seasons that temper the spirit. Agricultural life does not unfold in steady balance. It rises and falls with the temperament of nature. Some years the paddies glow with abundance, other years clouds withhold rain or frosts arrive too early. This section rests on a quiet truth: prosperity and hardship shape Edo society in equal measure. Toranosuke stands in his field again, this time in late summer, watching clouds gather with a weight that suggests more water than the land can bear. Villagers tie down thatched roofs, dikes are checked and reinforced with bundled straw. Children are ushered indoors, rains arrive, the river swells, the paddies tremble under sheets of descending water. Some fields survive, others do not. When harvest falters, the effects ripple outward. Merchants raise prices to survive their own costs. Samurai paid in rice find their stipends stretched thin. Domain officials calculate relief with an urgency masked behind formal speech. Not all provinces respond with generosity. Some tighten demands, forcing farmers to surrender the same portion of a smaller harvest. Others, more lenient, open granaries and reduce levies to keep villages intact. In these years, Edo's serenity dims slightly, not enough to shake its foundations, but enough for people to feel the subtle shift like tension beneath a warm surface. Hardship here is not dramatic. It is steady, measured, absorbed into the daily work of survival. Voices from the tea room. In times of strain, the arts often become places of reflection, and none offers clearer insight than the tea ceremony. We return to Shunryo, whose tea room smells of tatami and warm clay. Tonight he hosts 3 visitors, a junior official from Edo, a merchant whose business depends on stable market prices, and a scholar studying ancient agricultural treatises. The room is small, lit by a single lantern whose flame flickers gently each time water is poured. Silence dominates the first moments of the ceremony. Hands move slowly. Steam rises in gentle threads. Bowls are exchanged with the humility expected in this space. Only after the second serving does Shunryo speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Balance survives when hearts remain steady. The merchant nods, thinking of his ledgers. The scholar folds his hands, remembering treatises on harmony and governance. The official lowers his gaze, aware of the burdens his domain faces in a year of uncertain yield. Tea is not philosophy, yet it reveals philosophy. Not law, yet it strengthens resolve. Not strategy, yet it guides thought. When the guests leave, each carries a quiet clarity back into their respective worlds. In this way, the tea room becomes a place where the pressures of society are distilled into calm understanding, a gentle counterweight to the anxieties carried across fields and markets. Lanterns at the end of the day. Evening returns to Edo and its countryside with the same patient grace as morning. Lanterns bloom across porches and streets, casting warm circles of light on wooden planks. Families gather for simple meals. Neighbors exchange greetings. Distant drums from a shrine festival echo faintly across the river. The realm feels whole in these moments. Cities, humming villages, breathing paddies resting, and roads settling into dusk. Nothing here is perfect, but everything holds together with a kind of practiced steadiness, as though the entire archipelago shares one long exhale. This is the spirit of Edo's middle years, a life built from countless modest decisions sustained by discipline, smoothed by custom, and made gentle by the knowledge that harmony requires attention. The night deepens. Household lamps dim. The quiet spreads like ink across a page, and the story of the era continues onward, shaped by hands that work with patience and hearts that endure with dignity. The river that carried a city. The Sumida River glimmers beneath the early light, its surface shifting like brushed silk as boats drift across the current. Edo rises with a sense of quiet inevitability, a city not rushed awake but unfolded. Fishmongers balance baskets along the bank. Boatmen loosen ropes with practiced ease. Vendors tie back their sleeves and prepare the day's first offerings. Our framing truth is gentle. The river was Edo's hidden heartbeat. Everything moved by water, firewood, vegetables, fish, charcoal, timber. Goods that would take days to cross the city by foot slid silently through canals in a single morning. We meet Ono Yunosuke, a waterman whose arms bear the polished strength of someone who has rowed for decades. His boat, narrow, cedar-planked, worn smooth by time, glides between moored barges as he delivers firewood to merchants along the banks. He knows the river's moods, where currents snag, where silt gathers, where lantern light will fall at dusk. The Edo that shines in paintings depends on the Edo that labors unseen. Boatmen like Yunosuke keep the city balanced, carrying its weight in silence. From the river, Edo appears immense, a patchwork of roofs, gardens, and bridges. Yet beneath its scale lies an intimacy, a network of waterways running like threads through cloth-binding neighborhoods into a single living tapestry. The floating world's narrow streets. By late morning, the theatre districts stir. Woodblock artists set up benches. Actors rehearse lines behind thin screens. Vendors arrange stacks of sweet rice cakes, paper lanterns, and cheap novel pamphlets printed overnight. These narrow streets form what poets call the floating world, a place devoted to pleasure, art, and escape. Not rebellion, not decadence, but release, a necessary counterbalance to the rigid order of daily life. Our focus turns to Takiguchi Ren, a kabuki actor, known for his graceful gestures and expressive eyes. Offstage, he is quiet, almost modest. On stage, he becomes larger than himself, a young warrior, mourning lost love, a cunning thief, weaving shadows around him, a wandering priest wrestling with fate. Ren practices in a dim rehearsal room, light filtering through paper windows. A musician plucks the shamisen, slowly establishing the emotional rhythm. The floor creaks softly beneath Ren's measured steps. Kabuki is not mere entertainment. It is precision disguised as spontaneity, a dance of stylized movement, layered emotion, and subtle rebellion. The audience will gather by afternoon, samurai in plain clothing, so as not to attract notice, merchants eager for diversion, laborers seeking respite after morning toil. The theatre becomes a meeting ground where status bends, where imagination temporarily frees people from the roles assigned to them. In a society defined by clear boundaries, these performances provide space for the soul to stretch. Markets under an expanding sky. Midday brings the full heat of the city. Shadows shrink. Voices grow louder. Streets fill with the energy of thousands moving in intersecting paths. Near Nihonbashi, the pulse of commerce intensifies. Here, the shogunate's official market price for rice is posted daily. Here, travelers gather before dispersing across the archipelago. Here, the city concentrates its ambitions. Sagawa Kichijiro, the cotton merchant, stands beneath his awning, folding new bolts dyed a deep, rich indigo. His customers are steady samurai households needing cloth for uniforms, townsfolk seeking durable work garments, artisans purchasing scraps for practice stitching. Behind the counter, Kichijiro calculates each sale with the quiet satisfaction of someone who understands the delicate balance between supply and demand. He has watched prices rise during lean harvests, watched competition tighten during prosperous years, watched political edicts alter import rules with little warning. Commerce in Edo is not careless. It is strategy performed beneath lanterns and awnings. It is attention sharpened by routine. It is negotiation softened by politeness. Merchants follow the rules precisely, but within those rules they find room to maneuver, creating networks, favors, and quiet alliances that give them influence disproportionate to their official rank. The city thrives because its marketplace listens closely to the pulse of the countryside, adjusting itself like a great wheel turning with the seasons. Houses of parchment and quiet. Footsteps. Behind the bustle lies another Edo, the Edo of homes. Fragile structures of timber and paper built close together, warmed by braziers in winter and opened wide to catch breezes in summer. Inside these dwellings, life moves with careful intimacy. At the Matsunaga home, the samurai's son copies a passage from a moral tale. His brush trembles slightly, leaving a thicker stroke than intended. Hana notices, but says nothing. She kneels beside her hearth, adding a sliver of charcoal to the fire, allowing the child to correct his mistake at his own pace. Matsunaga returns early today. He places his ledger on a low table and kneels to remove his sandals. The room smells faintly of warm rice and pine ash. He greets his family with a bow rather than words. Through the thin walls, the neighborhood hums softly, the scrape of wood, the subdued laughter of two apprentices sharing a joke, the rhythmic tapping of a cloth dyer beating fabric outside. Privacy is porous here, but community is strong. People know one another's routines, moods, and burdens. Harmony is not enforced, it is negotiated daily through courtesy, listening, and restraint. These quiet households preserve the spirit of Edo just as much as its grand processions and bustling markets. The Garden of Night festivals. As twilight settles, Edo shifts its mood again. Children chase each other with paper lanterns. Vendors light charcoal braziers that glow like tiny suns. Shrine drums echo across the river as festivals gather momentum. Tonight, the district near Kanda Shrine hosts a small celebration. Streamers flutter from bamboo poles. Stalls offer skewers of grilled eels, sweet dumplings dusted with soybean flour, and cups of warm sake poured from clay flasks. Yunosuke the boatman arrives after his final delivery. He wipes river mist from his sleeves and joins a circle of neighbors, listening to a storyteller. The tale is familiar. An old legend of a fox spirit wandering beneath moonlit pines, but the telling is new, shaped by the performer's slow, deliberate cadence. Lanterns cast soft halos on the faces around him. Ren, the kabuki actor, wanders past in plain clothes unnoticed in the crowd. Kichijiro purchases a skewer for his apprentice. Even Matsunaga and Hana approach the shrine, their son tugging gently at their sleeves, eager for a sweet treat. Edo, in these moments, feels expansive, a shared breath among thousands who rarely speak of their dreams but sense one another's presence. Night does not disrupt the city. It rearranges it into smaller constellations, families, neighbors, performers, travelers, all moving within a calm shaped by long custom. The realm settles into its own silence. Later, when the last lanterns dim, the capital grows still again. The river slows, wind rustles through cypress trees that line the temples. Household windows glow faintly before going dark one by one. Nothing momentous marks this hour, nothing dramatic intrudes. This is Edo's essence, a realm that sustains itself through 1,000 quiet decisions made day after day. Its peace is not accidental, not fragile, not idle. It is cultivated, tended like a garden, preserved through habits so familiar that people no longer feel their weight. Under the soft hush of night, the city gathers itself inward. The river continues beneath the pale moon. The houses rest in close formation, lantern smoke thins into the sky, and the life of the era continues steady as breath. A ladder carved into the air. Morning settles over Edo with a pale, steady light. Roofs glisten faintly from the night's dew. Merchants lift shutters. Peasants approach the city gates with baskets of produce. Samurai households stir behind neat rows of walls and gates. Beneath this calm surface lies a structure as rigid as carved stone, a hierarchy that defined every gesture, every garment, every word spoken in the Tokugawa world. Japan of this era was arranged in 4 official classes: samurai peasants, artisans, merchants, each bound by duties and expectations older than any living memory. Above them stood the shogun. Below them, those without status, performers, laborers, outcasts. And yet, despite the clarity of this ladder, daily life revealed countless subtleties in how people balanced duty, ambition, and personal desire. The city breathed this structure the way a forest breathes wind, constantly, quietly, unavoidably. The samurai within the cage of rank. In theory, the samurai stood atop the social order. In practice, many lived modestly, some even frugally bound by rituals as strict as any law. We return to Matsunaga, whose stipend measured in rice no longer stretches as easily as it once did. His duties remain unchanged, record inventories maintain order, attend his lord's small ceremonies. Yet his household feels the pressure of unmet needs, a new robe for his growing son, repairs to the roof, the rising cost of firewood in lean years. Honor requires that he never complain. Frugality is expected, dignity demanded, discipline constant. But Matsunaga is not alone. Across Edo, hundreds of samurai families quietly adjust their lives, selling heirlooms, borrowing discreetly from merchants, teaching calligraphy for extra income, tightening their daily budgets with impeccable courtesy. Pride holds them upright, yet the gap between their official rank and their lived reality widens each year. This internal tension between identity and circumstance seeps slowly into the atmosphere of Edo, shaping decisions in ways the shogunate cannot fully account for. Responsibility weighs on them, and they carry it with a steadiness that does not ask for praise. Craft in the hands of artisans. Artisans stand in the middle rank, skilled yet often unseen. In Edo's wards, scroll mounters, carpenters, lacquer. Workers, potters, and bookbinders produce objects that circulate across the archipelago. Fine combs carved from boxwood inkstones, polished to a glass-like sheen paper, so light it seems woven from breath. Among them we meet Ishida Kohei, a lacquer craftsman whose workshop smells of raw timber and heated resin. He and his apprentices work with the patience of monks, applying coat after coat of glossy black lacquer to wooden tea bowls destined for refined households. Artisans live between worlds, not honored like samurai, not essential like peasants, yet indispensable to the culture that defines Edo. Their hands give shape to the era's beauty. Their discipline mirrors the order of the age. Their quiet mastery spreads through cities and villages alike. Merchants beneath the veil of status. In practice, merchants wield growing influence. In principle, they sit at the bottom of the official hierarchy. This contradiction defines much of Edo's subtle tension. At his cotton shop, Kichijiro studies the day's ledgers, noting patterns invisible to casual observers. Rice prices shift slightly. Competition increases near the theatre district, a domain known for fine cloth hints at new exports. Though forbidden from extravagant displays, merchants accumulate wealth through strategy, patience, and relationships stretching across the archipelago. Their knowledge of markets deepens each year. Their ability to stabilize or disrupt urban life becomes quietly formidable. Yet every transaction is made with humility, bowing to samurai customers, speaking with deliberate modesty, maintaining the appearance of deference despite economic influence. This careful dance, wealth held behind lowered eyes, keeps the hierarchy intact on the surface while reshaping Edo beneath it. The unseen lives at the edge. Beyond the recognized classes live those whose roles fall outside the official order. Night soil collectors, tanners, itinerant performers, beggars, and those born into hereditary outcast communities. Their daily labor makes the city function, though society offers them little acknowledgement. We see a group of night workers moving through Edo before dawn, carrying tools across their shoulders. They work swiftly, efficiently, maintaining sanitation for neighborhoods that prefer not to think of their presence. Despite the stigma attached to their status, their contribution is immense. Without them, Edo's million residents could not live in such dense proximity. Fire would spread, disease would take root, and streets would fill with waste. Yet these individuals remain on the margins, shaped by expectations they did not choose. Their resilience reveals an unspoken truth: the city's peace extends even to its periphery, where people endure, adapt, and build quiet bonds of their own. A tea master's reflection on rank. In his tea room, Shunryo prepares utensils for an evening ceremony. He wipes the bowl with a cloth of soft linen, adjusts the bamboo whisk, and watches the kettle's thin steam rise like a thread connecting earth to sky. Tonight's guests include a mid-ranking samurai burdened by debts, a merchant uncomfortable with his own prosperity, an artisan carrying pride in his craft, and a young monk who understands none of their concerns but listens deeply. In the tea room, rank dissolves. All kneel at the same height. All handle the same bowl. All hear the water's quiet simmering. When the final bowl is shared, Shunryo speaks. Every roll is a shape drawn by time, but the heart within it belongs to you. No one answers. The kettle murmurs softly. The air settles. In this small room, hierarchy loosens its hold just long enough for each guest to feel the weight they carry, not as a burden, not as privilege, but simply as the shape of their life. The city's quiet exhale. As night deepens, Edo drifts into stillness once more. The lanterns fade along the bridges. Shop banners are tied shut. The river catches faint moonlight on its slow-moving surface. The realm remains intact, supported by a structure as old as memory, softened by skill and habit, sustained by dignity, and moderated by countless acts of restraint. Nothing in this hierarchy is simple. Nothing is absolute. Nothing stands still. But for now, Edo breathes evenly, as though the city itself understands the importance of its careful balance, a balance held not by power, but by the quiet negotiations of everyday life. A shoreline, waiting in silence. Along the eastern edge of the archipelago, waves fold gently onto dark sand. Fishing boats rest upside down on wooden racks. Gulls circle the shallows where the tide pulls foam in thin ribbons across the beach. Here, far from Edo's density, a quiet tension begins to take shape, a subtle awareness that the world beyond Japan's shores continues its own restless turning. For more than 2 centuries, the archipelago has stood apart from global currents. Foreign ships approach only on permitted routes, trade flows through narrow channels, ideas arrive cautiously wrapped in layers of translation and approval, And yet distance does not silence the sea. Beyond the horizon, nations rise and exchange knowledge with increasing speed. New sciences spread from port to port. Empires expand. Vessels larger than any Japanese ship cross vast oceans in a fraction of the time once required. The shore feels this change, though no one speaks of it openly. Nagasaki the gate with one hinge. If Edo is the capital of order, Nagasaki is the island's cautious window to the world. The Dutch trading post at Dejima, a man-made island shaped like a fan, sits just offshore, connected to the city by a guarded bridge. Every entry, every exit, every document, every exchange is recorded with unwavering precision. Here we meet Hayashi Kazuteru, an interpreter, trained since childhood in Dutch vocabulary and the subtle nuances of European etiquette. His days are filled with reading, note-taking, and explaining technical manuscripts to officials, astronomy, treatises, medical diagrams, maps of distant continents, descriptions of machines no one in Edo has seen. The Dutch cannot leave their island. Japanese officials cannot enter without permission, and yet knowledge slips between them with patient consistency, like light passing through paper screens. This flow of information is known as Rangaku Dutch learning, a quiet pursuit, a disciplined curiosity, a small crack in the wall that surrounds the nation. Through this narrow opening, Japan absorbs glimpses of a rapidly changing world. Astronomy charts reveal the motions of planets more accurately than older models. Medical texts describe surgical techniques unfamiliar to local physicians. Maps show continents connected by trade routes stretching farther than imagination once allowed. Kazuteru feels the weight of each scroll. Not fear, not excitement, more like recognition, the sense that knowledge will shape the future in ways that neither decrees nor swords can contain. Osaka, the pulse of commerce. Far from the sea, Osaka hums with a different energy, a city built on trade accounting and the constant movement of goods. If Edo is the political heart, Osaka is the economic one. Rice brokers gather at Dojima, their calculations so precise that they effectively set prices nationwide. Here we meet Ueda Mitsuoki, a broker whose sharp memory and quiet manner turn negotiation into an art. He tracks shipments from hundreds of villages, anticipating shortages before farmers themselves sense them. His influence reaches Edo, Kyoto, and distant domains that rely on stable markets to manage stipends and debts. Osaka merchants study Dutch techniques eagerly, double entry. Bookkeeping improved storage methods patterns in global commerce, not to challenge the shogunate but to refine the machinery of stability. Their innovation is subtle yet profound, the transformation of economic rhythm into something close to science. Mitsuoki adjusts his abacus notes, a new trend from Kyushu, and closes his ledger with a calm that comes from understanding the delicate hinge upon which the nation turns. Pilgrims on the roads of curiosity, the knowledge once released travels with surprising resilience. Along the main highways, pilgrims carry talismans, prayers, and increasingly ideas. Monks discuss new interpretations of Buddhist cosmology influenced by Western astronomical texts. Artisans exchange techniques for dyes, metals, and paper. Traveling physicians test unfamiliar remedies learned through rare manuals circulating from Nagasaki to Osaka. One such traveler is Sawatari Joen, a physician from Edo who has journeyed westward to study dissection techniques demonstrated in Osaka by scholars trained in Rangaku. He walks with careful steps, carrying a wrapped case of medical instruments that clink softly at each milestone. At inns, he shares rooms with merchants, wandering poets, and pilgrims headed for the shrines at Ise. Each evening, he listens more than he speaks. He is struck by the hunger for knowledge he encounters, farmers curious about weather patterns, merchants asking about foreign medicines, students seeking clarity on anatomy charts. Joen realizes something subtle. The nation's curiosity has grown deeper than its restrictions. It is no longer content with inherited explanations of the world. This is not rebellion, it is exploration, steady, thoughtful, persistent. Artists beneath shifting skies. Even the arts absorb these faint winds of change. In Edo ukiyo-e, printmakers experiment with new pigments and perspectives. Some attempt Western-style shading techniques. Others carve maps of foreign lands using information brought quietly from Nagasaki. We join Hori Kanai, a print designer whose workshop echoes with the crisp sound of chisels against wood. Her latest commission is a triptych depicting a bustling harbour, boats, cranes, merchants, fish sellers, but with a perspective subtly influenced by a Dutch landscape she once glimpsed in a borrowed sketchbook. Kanai's apprentices watch as she adjusts the vanishing point and redraws the shoreline. They do not know the source of her methods, they only sense that the world within the prints feels larger than the city itself. Music, theatre, poetry all begin to incorporate hints of curiosity, references to foreign ships, metaphors drawn from planetary motion designs inspired by distant places. Edo culture remains distinctly Japanese, yet it stretches gently towards something wider. A meeting in the evening light, in a modest tea room on the outskirts of Edo Shunryo, prepares a small gathering. Tonight's guests are not samurai or merchants, but two scholars from Osaka and a visiting interpreter from Nagasaki. They kneel in silence as steam rises in thin, wavering strands. The kettle's hum blends with the distant murmur of evening traffic. The tea room glows softly, its walls absorbing the faint gold of lamplight. Conversation begins only after the second bowl is shared. They speak quietly of astronomy, of maps drawn with unfamiliar precision, of medicines that reduce fever more swiftly than expected, of ships capable of crossing oceans without clinging to coastlines. Shunryo listens, his posture steady. When the guests finish, he pours a final bowl, this one slower, almost meditative. It is good to know the world, he says, but better to know one's own heart in it. The visitors bow their heads, contemplating his words. Silence returns, not heavy, not uncertain, simply full of awareness. The tea room, as always, distills complexity into something clear enough to breathe. Night along the water. As darkness folds across the capital, lights tremble along the Sumida River. Boatmen finish their final routes, merchants tie down shutters, students roll up scrolls, and the streets narrow into gentle murmurs. Nothing dramatic announces the presence of change. The city retains its calm. The hierarchy remains intact. Daily routines unfold as they always have, and yet faint currents of knowledge ripple beneath the surface, carried by interpreters, merchants, scholars, pilgrims and artists. Each piece small, each movement quiet, each connection subtle. Edo continues to breathe evenly under its vast canopy of peace, but the world beyond its shores draws closer with every tide, with every manuscript, with every careful conversation shared beneath lantern light. A city that grows too quiet. Edo greets the morning with its usual softness. The rustle of bamboo blinds the creak of wooden bridges warming in the sun, the low clatter of merchants arranging crates along the river. Yet beneath this familiar quiet lies something harder to define. Not unrest, not fear, but a kind of inward tension, a stillness stretched ever so slightly beyond its natural shape. For decades, the structures of the realm have held. The samurai maintain order, the peasants feed the nation, the merchants keep the economy breathing, and the shogunate watches over all with steady composure. But as new knowledge filters slowly through Nagasaki, as Osaka's calculations grow more precise, as Edo's artists experiment with fresh perspectives, the air begins to shift in ways that conversation alone cannot capture. No decree can stop curiosity. No boundary can fully contain ambition. No hierarchy, however meticulously designed, can remain untouched when the world beyond begins to accelerate. Edo remains peaceful, yet its silence feels more layered than before. The strain on the samurai's purse. Samurai households across the city begin to feel a quiet compression. Stipends measured in rice remain constant, but the cost of living does not. Firewood prices rise in cold winters, medical expenses arrive unpredictably, and domain taxes fluctuate in years of uneven harvest. We visit Matsunaga's home once again. He kneels at a low table, reviewing his accounts by lamplight. The parchment bears a few careful patches where ink has been corrected, a sign of the delicate balancing his household now requires. Hana mends clothing in the next room, her stitching smooth and unhurried. Their son sleeps beside a small wooden sword he carved himself earlier in the day. Nothing is visibly wrong. Nothing breaks, but the ease that once accompanied the samurai's position erodes at the edges. Some families sell heirloom armor discreetly. Others borrow modestly from merchants. A few take on side work teaching, transcribing, advising activities once considered beneath their rank. These adjustments are quiet, but they reveal a deeper truth. The samurai's symbolic authority is gradually outpacing their material stability. The hierarchy still stands, but its lines feel less rigid. Peasants under shifting skies. Far from the capital, the seasons continue their steady turning. Fields redden with early morning light. Irrigation channels glisten as farmers tend them with practiced care. Yet in Toranosuke's village, the past year's irregular rains have left marks still visible. The harvest was adequate, but not generous. Granaries hold enough for obligations, but not enough to smooth over every concern. Toranosuke walks the embankments in early light, his sandals sinking slightly into the damp soil. He tests a handful of earth between his fingers, smelling it with the attention of a craftsman reading the mood of his material. He is not worried, not yet, but he understands how quickly the balance can shift. Peasant life contains no margin for complacency. Each season must be met with vigilance. Nature's temperament remains the ultimate authority no matter how polished Edo's governance may be. And while farmers rarely speak of politics, their conversations grow more contemplative about weather patterns, about tax expectations, about rumors traveling along the roads from other provinces. The countryside holds its breath steady but alert. Merchants, feeling the edges of their power. In Edo's markets, the merchant class continues to grow in wealth, nuance and quiet influence. Kichijiro greets his customers with the same respectful bow, yet he senses subtleties. Others overlook samurai who inspect their purse twice before purchasing, artisans who calculate more carefully, fellow merchants who hedge their decisions with increasing caution. Trade remains strong, but the margins have begun to narrow. Prices fluctuate in ways that reflect more than simply supply and demand, a sign of a society carrying invisible pressures. Merchants understand this better than most. Their ledgers reveal patterns even officials fail to see. Some see opportunity in adaptation, others proceed with restraint. But beneath the marketplace civility lies an awareness that the economy behaves more like a tide than a stone. It moves, it swells, it pulls away, and no one can fully predict its next gesture. Whispers from the domains beyond. Edo domains across the archipelago face changes of their own. Some struggle with reduced harvests, others manage debts incurred by extensive construction projects or required journeys to the capital. Internal reports move along the highways with quiet urgency. Officials summarize crop yields, inspectors record conditions in remote villages, scholars advise on reforms impossible to enact swiftly. We encounter Hoshino Tadakatsu, the daimyo, whose procession we followed in earlier parts. He stands in his castle's garden, contemplating a report handed to him by his chief retainer. The document speaks of rising expenses, modest shortfalls in rice, and the need to adjust next year's obligations. Tadakatsu's expression remains calm, yet the weight of these numbers is unmistakable. Domains across the land face similar dilemmas, none catastrophic, none dramatic. Yet all require attention, a slow, steady negotiation between tradition and circumstance. The shogunate expects compliance, but reality asks for flexibility. Artists at the edge of transition. In the cultural districts, change appears not as tension, but as experimentation. Printmakers carve scenes with deeper shadows. Poets reference distant lands only half understood. Musicians experiment with rhythms borrowed indirectly from foreign melodies heard near Nagasaki. And in the theatre district, Ren, the kabuki actor, rehearses a new role, a warrior torn between loyalty and personal duty, a theme that resonates more deeply with audiences each season. The performance requires precision-controlled gestures, carefully modulated emotion movement that conveys internal struggle without speaking it outright. Ren senses the texture of the times, even if he cannot name it. His audience feels it too, a quiet recognition that internal conflict, once an artistic motif, now feels closer to everyday life. The arts continue to flourish, but with a tone that leans slightly inward, as if the city itself is listening for something just beyond its reach. A gathering in the fading light. At twilight, a small group assembles at Shunryo's tea room, a samurai facing rising expenses, a merchant adjusting to subtle market changes, an artisan seeking stability for his apprentices, a scholar returning from Osaka with new insights, and a traveler who has carried news from Kyushu. They kneel on tatami mats. The kettle's soft hum fills the space. Outside, fireflies glimmer along a garden path. Shunryo moves with quiet grace, pouring water, whisking tea, passing bowls in silence. No one speaks of trouble directly, no one complains, yet each guest carries a private question. How long will balance last? What lies beneath the surface of the era? What changes lightly touch the edges of their world? When the final bowl is shared, Shunryo offers only a single thought. Still water reflects the sky, but it also hides the current beneath. The guests bow. The kettle eases into silence. The tea room dims. Each person departs with a sense not of unease but of awareness, as though they have been reminded that peace requires more than routine. It requires attentiveness. Nightfall over a restless calm. Edo settles into another night of disciplined quiet. Lanterns glow along the river. Shop shutters close with practiced familiarity. The streets become corridors of dim amber light. Nothing breaks the surface. Nothing disrupts the order. Nothing announces change. Yet the signs accumulate softly. A tighter household budget, a cautious merchant decision, an official report sent with unusual speed, a new idea carried along the highway, an artistic gesture revealing subtle tension. The realm remains steady, but its stillness feels heavier now, as though the city itself senses the shifting weight of the era. The night deepens, not with fear, but with reflection, the kind that comes before recognition. When the sea brings unfamiliar shapes. Along Japan's southern coastline, the morning fog lifts slowly, revealing a horizon lined with the gentle curve of sunlight. Fishermen prepare nets. Children collect driftwood. Waves whisper against the sand with the same steady breath they've held for centuries. And then, on certain days, a darker outline appears in the distance. Not thundercloud, not island, not storm, but ships unfamiliar in shape and scale, moving with a confidence that unsettles even seasoned sailors. Their presence is rare, yet each sighting travels along the coast like a quiet rumor, masts taller than any local vessel hulls, built for long crossings, flags that flutter with foreign symbols. Most pass without incident, keeping their distance, respecting the boundaries set by the shogunate. But the sea has begun to speak a different language, one of movement, ambition, and global reach. And though the sightings remain sparse, they leave impressions deep enough to ripple across the archipelago. The interpreter's burden. In Nagasaki, Hayashi Kazuteru, the interpreter stands inside a storeroom stacked with Dutch books, maps, and medical diagrams. He has spent years translating fragments of a world rapidly expanding beyond Japan's controlled vantage point. Today, officials bring him an unusual request, a detailed report on the movements of foreign ships in East Asian waters. Kazuteru sits at his low table, turning pages of a European almanac. It contains references to steam engines, devices capable of moving ships without wind. He hesitates, rereading the description. A vessel that moves against the tide, against the wind, at speeds unthinkable for wooden sails. He pauses, aware that such knowledge must be presented with care. Officials rely on him not for alarm, but for clarity. Kazuteru forms his report with balanced words, neither sensational nor dismissive. A simple acknowledgement that the world possesses technologies not yet seen in Japan, and that these developments alter the nature of distance itself. For centuries, the archipelago has relied on isolation as protection. But insulation is a delicate shield when the world outside is transforming. Kazuteru rolls the scroll, aware that information once read acquires a life of its own. The domain ledger tilts, far from Nagasaki in his northern province. Hoshino Tadakatsu studies the most recent financial records with a measured calm. The numbers do not align as they once did. Expenses for alternate attendants rise each year, caravan supplies, ceremonial garments, maintenance of Edo residences. Meanwhile, rice yields fluctuate with increasing unpredictability. Tadakatsu's advisor bows beside him, offering suggestions, cutting certain stipends, reducing planned repairs, petitioning for leniency in annual obligations. But each choice carries consequence. Reduce stipends and samurai morale thins. Postpone repairs and the domain's infrastructure weakens. Petition Edo and risk appearing incapable. Tadakatsu places the scroll aside and steps into his castle garden. Autumn wind stirs the gravel path. A pond reflects maple leaves drifting across its surface. The domain will endure, of that he is certain. Yet he feels the realm's weight leaning ever so slightly a tilt that requires careful adjustment, like the balance of a teapot set on uneven stone. This inclination is not crisis, but it is movement. Edo's marketplace draws tighter circles. In the capital, the marketplace near Nihonbashi reveals its own signs of strain. Kichijiro arranges his cotton displays with the same precision as always. Yet he notices patterns: shifting samurai buying fewer bolts, artisans negotiating harder, customers requesting smaller cuts of cloth. None of this disrupts trade outright. Yet Kichijiro senses a subtle contraction, as though the city is bracing for a change still unnamed. He keeps his ledgers, meticulously studying weekly totals with sharpened attention. Merchants like him have no seat in the political hierarchy, but they read the world through numbers. When margins tighten in Edo, it is not merely an economic signal, it is a reflection of the entire archipelago's pulse. Kichijiro closes his account book, gently aware that clarity comes not from a single day's sales, but from the slow arc of shifting seasons. Artists feeling the wind. In a workshop near the theatre district, Hori Kanai, the print designer, carves a new landscape block. Her knife moves steadily, lifting curls of soft wood from the grain. Her design depicts a well-known Edo bridge, but with shadows stretched longer than usual, clouds drawn with unfamiliar density. She cannot say why she altered the scene this way, only that the world feels slightly larger, and her prints reflect this. Apprentices mix pigments beside her, commenting quietly on a recent theatre performance. They mention Ren's latest role, a warrior caught between duty and uncertainty, and how audiences seemed unusually absorbed. Kanai listens, tracing a final line across the block. Art does not predict the future, but it often senses what lies in its direction. Her new print, when hung for sale, will draw eyes not for its beauty, but for the feeling it carries, the feeling of a landscape holding its breath. A physician at the crossroads of knowledge, Sawatari, Joen the Edo physician who once traveled west to study rangaku techniques, now examines a patient in his small clinic. On the table beside him lies a Dutch anatomical illustration, a tool he consults privately, aware that some colleagues view such materials with caution. Joen places his hand gently on the patient's wrist, feeling the pulse with refined sensitivity. He combines traditional diagnosis with insights gleaned from foreign texts, hoping to ease fevers more quickly, to treat injuries with greater understanding. His success earns quiet praise and curiosity spreads. A young apprentice watches him closely. A visiting monk asks questions. An elderly neighbor offers gratitude for a healing that arrived sooner than expected. Knowledge radiates outward, not through declarations but through results. Joen closes his manuscript carefully, feeling the tug between tradition and discovery, a balance he must maintain with both humility and conviction. The tea master and the traveling scholar. Toward dusk, the tea room of Shunryo fills with the faint glow of an oil lamp. Tonight's guest is a scholar from Kyoto, a man known for studying cyclical change in history. They kneel opposite each other. The kettle breathes a soft, steady sound. The scent of tatami sharpens in the evening air. The scholar speaks of patterns he observes how societies experience periods of consolidation, followed by seasons of quiet movement beneath the surface. Shunryo listens, whisking the bowl slowly, his hands steady. When he finally speaks, his words fall gently like ash from burning incense. Some eras change loudly. Others move like shadows not seen but felt. The scholar nods, receiving the bowl with both hands. In the distilled stillness of the tea room, the moment carries a simple awareness. The Edo world remains peaceful, yet its stillness now holds an undercurrent as subtle as the shift in wind before dawn. Night along the sloping horizon. Night arrives softly across the archipelago. Fishermen pull boats inland, merchants shutter their shops, samurai walk home beneath dim lanterns, peasants watch the sky for signs of coming weather. Officials read reports by candle flame, artists mix pigments for morning work. Nothing breaks, nothing falters, nothing alarms, and yet the era feels poised as though the realm stands on a quiet incline, leaning toward a future not yet visible. The world beyond grows closer. The knowledge within grows sharper. The balance that has held so long adjusts imperceptibly, but undeniably. The night deepens, the river reflects the moon, and Edo continues its steady breath under a sky that now carries whispers from faraway places. A capital listening to its own footsteps. Edo wakes beneath a muted sky. Clouds stretch in long, pale bands above the city, as though the heavens themselves have thinned into quiet thought. The familiar rhythms unfold, shutters opening along Nihonbashi boats, drifting across the Sumida artisans, striking chisels against wood samurai, walking the same disciplined routes toward their posts. Yet something in the air has changed. The city feels unusually attentive, as if listening to the sound of its own movement. Nothing is wrong, nothing is broken. But the stillness that once felt seamless now carries a slight resonance, an echo born from distant tides of knowledge, from subtle shifts in harvests and markets, from murmurs carried along the highways. Edo remains steady, but its steadiness no longer feels entirely effortless, a lord between two pressures. In his northern domain, Hoshino Tadakatsu prepares for his next mandated journey to Edo. His attendants pack ceremonial garments, lacquer boxes, gifts, and rice for the road. Stable hands check harnesses in the chilly morning air. Inside the castle, Tadakatsu meets his senior retainers. Their discussion is polite, but laden with subtext, the strain of expenses, the expectations of the shogunate, the reality of last season's modest harvest. Tadakatsu's composure never wavers. He reviews the travel plans, signs the necessary documents, and offers measured encouragement to those who serve him. But as he steps into the courtyard, his gaze lingers briefly on the castle walls that require maintenance, walls his treasury cannot fully repair this year. That pause, brief as it is, reveals the subtle weight domains now carry, not crisis, not rebellion, simply pressure spread thin across responsibilities that no longer align cleanly. At the center of the market, back in Edo, the heart of commerce beats along the bridge at Nihonbashi. Kichijiro stands beneath his awning, folding deep blue cotton into neat cascading layers. Customers pass steadily, yet fewer samurai browse without purchasing. More townsfolk compare prices carefully before committing. Artisans request smaller cuts of fabric-saving scraps for later projects. The market is not shrinking, it is tightening. Kichijiro notices details invisible to others, the pace of coin exchange, the weight of silence between transactions, the rare hesitations of buyers who once purchased confidently. He adjusts his inventory, updates his ledger, and walks to the rice exchange after closing, observing brokers in animated but restrained conversation. Osaka's grain prices influence every corner of Edo, and shifts in the countryside ripple into the capital months later. Kichijiro reads these movements with trained intuition. He senses a future requiring greater caution, greater patience, greater sensitivity to the city's quiet signals. Commerce thrives in Edo, but now it moves with a subtle, careful grace. A samurai in narrowing space. In his modest home, Matsunaga examines his monthly accounts. The lamp's flame flickers slightly, casting moving shadows across the ledger. Rice stipends arrive as always, yet their value stretches thinner each season. Fuel prices rise, schooling for his son grows more expensive. Repairs to the roof can no longer be postponed. Matsunaga is disciplined. He does not complain. He does not mention worry to his wife. He simply adjusts, reducing certain expenses, cutting unneeded comforts, making quiet decisions in the soft dark of evening. His sword hangs on the wall, well-oiled, beautiful, symbolic. But it is his brush, his calculations, and his patience that sustain his household. He does not resent this. He understands the nature of service. He carries his obligations as samurai have always done, yet he senses the narrowing, that quiet shift in the space between rank and livelihood. It is not dramatic, it is simply real. Fields beneath an uncertain sky. Far from Edo, Toranosuke walks the familiar ridges of his paddies. The air feels heavy for early spring. Clouds gather in uneven patterns. Wind passes through the valley with a damp edge. The previous harvest was modest. The village has managed, helped by careful storage and cooperation. But another poor season would leave no cushion. Toranosuke tests the soil. He examines the irrigation channels. He listens to the rhythm of water flowing through the gates. He understands weather signs better than most. He senses instability, not calamity, but irregularity. Rice cultivation depends on harmony, and harmony depends on patterns that now feel slightly disrupted. Still he works, he leads the younger farmers, he teaches them the old rhythms while watching the new ones cautiously. The fields reflect the sky, calm yet edged with possibility, a physician who sees further than expected. In Edo's winding back streets, Sawatari Joan completes his evening rounds. He carries 2 bags, one with traditional medicines, the other with instruments inspired by Dutch diagrams. Joan observes patterns his patients do not recognize: slightly more respiratory illnesses this season, slightly longer recovery periods, slightly sharper requests for assistance from nearby households. He does not interpret this as danger, simply adjustment. The environment shifts subtly and the body responds subtly. Joen writes careful notes by lamplight. He compares symptoms to foreign medical texts. He considers the possibility that knowledge may soon need to expand beyond what his teachers once deemed sufficient. His small clinic, lit with a single flickering lamp, becomes a quiet crossroads between tradition and the expanding world. An artist and her deepening shadows. In her workshop, Hori Kanai finalizes a new print, a city street at dusk beneath heavy clouds. The composition is familiar: a bridge, a row of shops, a lantern glowing in the foreground. But the shadows extend farther than usual, the sky holds more weight, and the river beyond the bridge feels almost contemplative. Kanai works without explaining her choices. Her apprentices sense the shift, but do not question it. The print is not somber, it is not foreboding, it simply acknowledges depth, the depth of a city that feels the world around it more acutely than before. Her art mirrors the realm's sensitivity, capturing an atmosphere that words often fail to hold. A tea gathering with unspoken questions. At twilight, Shunryo's tea room welcomes a small group of guests, a merchant, a samurai and artisan, and a visiting scholar from Edo Castle. The room glows with warm lamplight. Steam rises gently from the kettle. Outside, a faint wind stirs the garden bamboo. The guests speak quietly at first of markets, of weather, of theatre performances, of distant ports. Yet beneath their words lies a shared recognition, the sense that the era feels subtly different, as though the air has shifted tone. Shunryo does not comment on this. He pours tea with deliberate, measured precision. He places each bowl with the calm authority of someone who understands both movement and stillness. When conversation pauses, he offers a single reflection. Balance does not disappear. It changes shape. The guests bow, absorb the thought, and sip their tea in a silence that feels thoughtful rather than uneasy. Night over a city that knows more than it says. Evening folds across Edo, softening the rooftops, quieting the market, steadying the river into a slow, dark mirror. Lanterns flicker along the bridges. Footsteps fade. The hum of the day dissolves into a layered hush. Nothing has broken. Nothing has shifted abruptly. Peace remains whole, carefully maintained, carefully lived. Yet the realm now listens to the sea, to the roads, to its own breath, to knowledge that drifts quietly from distant places. Edo stands in its familiar stillness, but with eyes slightly more open, ears slightly more attentive, and hearts slightly more aware that the world beyond its shores casts longer reflections than before. A realm poised between night and morning. The final days of this long era of peace arrive not with thunder, not with upheaval, but with a stillness so refined it feels almost translucent. Edo wakes beneath a sky that holds more brightness than cloud. Streets unfurl in familiar rhythm, merchants lifting shutters, fishmongers calling the morning's catch, children in temple schools practicing their first characters. Nothing appears changed on the surface. The city carries itself with the same measured grace it has known for generations. And yet beneath its calm, Edo feels like a lantern held at the threshold of dawn, its light steady, its flame enduring its surroundings, beginning to brighten in ways that reveal the edges of a new day. This final part of our saga opens with the truth that defines the entire era. Edo Japan has mastered stillness, but the world has begun to move faster than stillness can hold. The Lord's Long Road. Home on the highways leading away from the capital, Hoshino Tadakatsu's procession moves steadily toward the north. Armor polished, banners aligned, servants attentive. The journey is neither triumphant nor grim. It feels contemplative. Tadakatsu rides at the center, his expression as composed as ever. But when he lifts his gaze toward distant mountains, a subtle shift passes through him, the awareness that his responsibilities now require not only loyalty, but foresight. At each post station he receives quiet reports, harvest prospects, market fluctuations, notices of slight social tensions within the domain. Nothing alarming, but everything calling for attention. His retainers sense it too. While duties remain unchanged, the margins for error have thinned. The daimyo's authority will endure, but it must adjust subtly, thoughtfully, to a world whose rhythm is no longer perfectly aligned with Edo's. A city that remembers its duty back in the capital, Matsunaga walks toward his post along a familiar route. His sandals tap softly against the stones. A line of schoolchildren passes him, each bowing politely. He returns the gesture with measured calm. At the storehouse, he reviews inventories with the same precision he has practiced for years. Each mark of his brush is deliberate, each figure checked twice. Yet Matsunaga feels something he cannot name, a sense that his role, while still vital, exists within a world preparing to shift ever so slightly. He teaches his son that evening under lamplight lessons in brushwork ethics and the value of calm in uncertain times. The boy listens, absorbing more than words, absorbing the atmosphere of a household that maintains dignity with gentle discipline, even as the realm breathes differently beyond their walls. In families like this, the essence of Edo survives patience, ritual, restraint, continuity. Even when the landscape of duty begins to tilt, merchants, sensing a new horizon. Kichijiro rearranges his cotton bolts beneath the afternoon light, adjusting folds with practiced ease. He has noticed a gradual change in demand, certain colors sought more often, others falling from favor, purchases made with more deliberation. His ledger tells a story. The city's spending tightens and loosens in subtle waves as though responding to currents beyond simple economics. Kichijiro closes the shop early today. He walks toward the river, watching the boats move against the low sun. Commerce has always been attentive to the world, to weather, to harvests, to the behavior of officials. But now it responds to something less tangible, a feeling of transition, a collective awareness that Edo's long equilibrium will require new forms of balance. For merchants, adaptation is instinct. Kichijiro breathes the river air, steadying himself the way a seasoned navigator reads the wind. Fields that prepare for tomorrow. In the countryside, Toranosuke stands at the edge of his paddies. The green shoots shimmer lightly under the spring breeze. Water flows cleanly along the channels he and his neighbors repaired in winter. This year looks promising. Yet Toranosuke senses the fragility of promise. Weather patterns shift unpredictably. Reports from nearby villages speak of slight variations in yield. He works with care, sharpened by experience, checking soil texture, adjusting gates, guiding young farmers through the details of timing and water depth. Toranosuke's life has never been about certainty. It has always been about attention. As he watches the fields ripple like brushed silk under the morning sun, he understands that the land continues to shape the realm just as much as the capital does. The farmers will endure. Their rhythm remains slow, steady, and essential. Their work will guide Japan into whatever age follows. Artists recording what words cannot. In Edo's print workshops, Hori Kanai prepares a new block. Tonight she carves not a scene of pleasure quarters or bustling bridges, but an image of the sea, wide open with distant sails at the edge of sight. She has never seen foreign ships herself. She knows them only through sketches whispered along the artisan networks, through stories carried by traveling merchants. Yet her mind shapes them into something symbolic, not threat, not promise, simply presence. Her apprentices watch quietly as she works, realizing that the design captures an emotion they have sensed too, the awareness of a world larger than the one framed by the city walls. Kanai's print will circulate widely, not because of novelty, but because people will recognize in it something they themselves have felt, yet cannot articulate. Art often reveals before analysis. It senses what society is beginning to absorb. The physician who understands the moment. In his clinic, Sawatari, Join studies a foreign anatomical chart as soft rain taps gently on the roof. He hears footsteps outside a neighbor seeking medicine for a persistent cough. Join prepares a remedy with practiced calm, mixing traditional herbs with modern techniques, learned from Dutch texts. The patient thanks him, then pauses at the doorway to ask softly, "Is it true the world beyond is changing so quickly?" Join answers only with a measured smile. He avoids speculation yet carries his own understanding. Medicine teaches him that bodies change gradually, cell by cell, breath by breath. Perhaps nations do the same. He returns to his notes, writing observations with the calm of someone who sees transition not as a disruption but as a continuation. A final tea in the fading light. At twilight, Shunryo prepares what may be his simplest ceremony yet. No guests of rank, no special occasion. Just a gathering of those who have walked different paths in this saga. A merchant, a samurai, a craftsman's apprentice, a physician, and a traveling scholar. The tea room fills with the warm glow of a single lantern. Steam rises softly from the kettle, curling into the quiet air. Conversation unfolds gently of harvests of theatre, of distant knowledge of the small adjustments each person has made in their lives. Shunryo listens. He serves each bowl with the same dignified movement, a reminder that ritual endures even as the world subtly reorients. When the final bowl is shared, he speaks a single reflection. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the art of moving with care. The tea room holds the silence after his words, as though embracing it. One by one, the guests bow and step into the evening. The garden path rustles with wind. The lantern by the door flickers gently. The tea master watches until the last silhouette fades, then closes the tea room with a soft click. Lanterns. Glowing at the threshold of a new age. Edo settles under a clear night sky. Lanterns sway above the river. Actors finish their performances. Merchants close their shutters. Farmers in distant villages rest weary muscles. Samurai sheathe their duties alongside their swords. Children drift to sleep on tatami mats warmed by the day's sun. The city breathes with the dignity of an era that has shaped generations. The peace remains whole. The order remains intact. The rhythm remains measured. Yet the horizon glows slightly as if the first faint light of morning presses gently against the edges of the night. The world outside moves. Japan listens. The long stillness of Edo, refined over centuries, now stands at the quiet verge of transition. Not a break, not a collapse, simply the soft shift of a lantern as dawn approaches. And in that gentle shift, the legacy of this era, its discipline, its artistry, its harmony, its patience, continues forward into the chapters that will shape the centuries to come.